Welcome to a Peskotomuhkati podcast. This conversation is about treaties, and the next person you'll hear is Paul Williams, lead negotiator, talking about treaties.
We have treaties now. The question is how to make them meaningful and fulfill the original vision of them 200 years later, because they're not going away.
Interesting. What is the origin of the word treaty?
The English word comes from the Latin tratare, meaning to trade, to do commerce.
Aha.
The Peskotomuhkati word, likotawagan, it means to make family. So right from the beginning, people had different concepts of what they were doing together.
Pretty radically different.
And yet they were able to say that the effect of what they wanted to do together was basically the same. They wanted to live together without conflict.
And live honestly and live appreciatively of each other and each other's work and future and children and things like that.
And as the Chief Justice of Canada said in 1997, let's face it, we're all here to stay. That was the thinking in 1725 just as well.
Now, the really interesting thing, one of many, shall we say, interesting things that I've learned is that this is a part of Canada that never was a part of the Indian Act. Never.
This small community was, it's a little complicated. Every Indigenous nation anywhere near the Canada-US border has people on both sides. And the ones who remained in Canada more often than not, but not always, were recognized as Indians under the Indian Act, which started up in the 1870s. Peskotomuhkati people had small reserves, but used them as part of their annual round rather than as places of permanent residence. Canada disposed, and New Brunswick disposed of most of the reserves. And New Brunswick especially prosecuted people for hunting and fishing, so a lot of the people moved to the American side because they could, and because there were reservations on the American side. So the people who remained in Canada were even more marginalized, and when it came time after 1951 to make a list of who was an Indian, Canada simply didn't show up to make those lists. So we're running 70 years late.
Wow.
It took us 10 years to persuade the federal government that that's what happened.
That's sort of gobsmacking. Extremely hard work, I would imagine.
With people who weren't terribly interested in working as hard as we were, which is another problem.
Do you think in the last maybe decade or maybe more that the rest of Canada is seeing this through entirely different eyes? It seems to me there's been change.
First thing I say is in 90% of the world, people who do what I do for a living, most of them are in jail or disappeared or dead. So Canada's not that bad. In 1990, what we learned in Eastern Mohawk country is that Canada's got an army and we don't.
Very true.
Peace, order, and good government in the Canadian Constitution is a military term. Have attitudes changed? Yes and no. Yes, the present Canadian government has a commitment to actual change, but on the other hand, it's dealing with a situation where 1/6 of Indigenous communities have boil water advisories and other people don't.
To our, deep shame, this goes on.
The statistics are bald and scary. That is, youth suicide rates 20 times that of the rest of Canada. Infant mortality rates double that of the rest of Canada. Education statistics, heck, I live in a 40% diabetic community.
That's a,
that doesn't have a food store.
oh, yeah.
Yes, we've got a huge amount of catching up to do. So, and the other side of it, the part that rings very strange, actually, two statistics, if I can play statistics. One is Canada's having a huge amount of trouble recognizing 3,000 Peskotomuhkati people who live on the other side of the river as its treaty partners, and recognizing they have any rights at all, but Canada takes in 300,000 foreigners a year. The other side is, you think about eastern New Brunswick, southeastern New Brunswick, as being long settled and long civilized and not very Aboriginal. In fact, the indigenous population of the two counties, one in Maine, one in New Brunswick, that the Peskotomuhkati people live in, they're 15% of the population. That's the same percentage as the Nisga'a in northern British Columbia. It means we're dealing with a situation where there isn't that much privately held land, where we still have the flexibility to do imaginative things, and where we have the leverage and the possibility to create a critical mass that will preserve culture and language. It's going to be an uphill fight, but at least we have willing partners for a change.
I think I see hope in millennials, or so-called millennials and younger people, that they're not necessarily going to accept the world that has been left to them. They want to make changes, and there are glimmers in Canada and some glimmers all over the world, with many gaping holes, but more than there were when I was a kid, for example, where there was virtually no acknowledgement or interest or respect. I think something's happening. Do you?
I think different things are happening all at once. I'm terrified that we're dealing with climate refugees and that it may be irreversible. I'm frightened that more and more authoritarian regimes are popping up, that racism and misogyny are becoming permissible, where we thought we had sort of eradicated them along with measles. Yeah. For that matter, we thought we'd eradicated measles.
Eradicated measles, yeah, that's true.
So, yeah, there are glimmers, and there are also glimmers in the face of huge shadows.
Yeah.
It could go either way, and all we can do is work hard to make sure it goes the right way.
And you're in the forefront.
Yeah, it's where the light lives.
Thanks for talking to me.
Thank you.
You've been listening to a Peskotomuhkati podcast. Any views expressed in these podcasts are not necessarily those of the nation, council, employees, citizens, neighbors, or friends. Our objective is stimulating conversation. Thanks for listening. There are many ways to join in the conversation or find out more. The YouTube channel is Peskotomuhkati at Skutik. You can visit the office or write to 27 King Street, St. Stephen, New Brunswick, E3L 2C1. The main office phone number is area code 506-466-2221. The fax is 506-466-2217. Visit the website konaskamkuk.com. Facebook is Passamaquoddy at Skutik Office. Instagram at Passamaquoddy Office. And Twitter at Skutikat.